39 years ago, exactly 39 years ago, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini landed at Mehrabad airport to the cheering of his supporters. And then, 10 days later, he declared the establishment of the Islamic Republic of Iran under his leadership. The change brought about by this revolution on modern day Iran is indisputable fact. This revolution led to structuring of norms, values, and identities that were in accordance to the worldview of the leader, of Khomeini. And since its establishment, the regime, Iran, has undergone significant changes that have left a mark on the basic policies of its leader. As a general rule, this timeline can be divided into 5 different periods. The first period can be dated from its establishment and until the end of Iraq-Iran war. This war that caused great loss in life and property also can be defined as a formative period for the regime, because the bloody confrontation and the sense of isolation led to the structuring, for example, of the self-reliance concept. One of the examples of this template is the development of the ballistic missile in Iran, maritime capabilities, and even the economy of resistance. And the war also formed the top echelon of the current military security establishment in Iran. As we can see, the top commanders of the Revolutionary Guards, they evolved from this war. And another symbol of this stormy period was, of course, the suppression of opposition element that basically started right after the revolution. But yes, it is true that the big wave of suppression was since July 1988, that basically left the Iranian opposition outside Iran's border with little room for influence on domestic and foreign policies. But the war also enhanced the popular mobilization template. And I will argue that the theocratic regime that has grown from a state of chaos has developed a template that it's used or implemented in states that are on the verge of collapse today. And one of the first example was the establishment of the Comité Hayya and Relabi that acted as a police force right after the revolution. And then, of course, the establishment of Basij organization, Basij Musta'azefin, one of the most powerful organizations acting in Iran. And during the war, 1982, the establishment of the Badr organization, one of the most powerful organizations acting today and influencing in Iraq. But the big achievement from their point of view was the establishment of the Hezbollah in Lebanon in the same year, 1982. And I will argue that the Hezbollah is no longer a local player acting in Lebanon. Hezbollah is a regional player influencing in Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and in Bahrain. So from Iran's point of view, it's a success. And shortly after the end of the war, Iran faced a great challenge due to the death of its leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, in June 1989. And the appointment of Ali Khamenei, who lacked the theological credentials, was a challenge for the survivability of the regime. And on top of this, the dismissal of Ayatollah Hussein Ali Montazeri, who had all the credentials, the theological credentials, and perceived as the heir of Khomeini, shed a light on the post-revolutionary decision-making process. And in retrospect, I will argue that the election of Ali Khamenei as a supreme leader accelerated the fragmentation existing in the religious establishment in Iran, because it gave priority to middle-rank ulama serving in governmental institutions on top of high-rank mujtahids representing pure knowledge and scholastic degree. So that was a change of balance of power. And the second period is the period of rehabilitation. And of course, the period of rehabilitation coincided with the 8 years in office of Hashemi Rafsanjani from 1989 till 1997. And the economic stagnation was one of the outcomes and characteristics of this period due to the outcome of the war. But due to the economic stagnation, vast parts of the rehabilitation and construction project were transferred to the hands of the Revolutionary Guards that made them not just as a security force, but as an economic force. And I will argue that the Revolutionary Guards, the Pasdaris, are the main concession holder for construction, rehabilitation, telecommunication, acting today in Iran. And going back to Rafsanjani sought to construct a modern state, but staying loyal to the ideological pillars of Khomeini. But once Khamenei consolidated his power with the help of the right wing, the security establishment, he became an obstacle to Rafsanjani's initiatives. And as a result, we are arriving to the election of Hamad Hatami to presidency. In a way, the election of Hatami reflected a change of balance in Iran's political arena. And it reflected the disappointment of the young generation from the pattern of politics and the desire of the society to move away from the isolationist stance in regard of foreign policy. And yes, the era of Hatami was dubbed as the liberal period that reflected his worldview. As we recall, his statements on dialogue among nations, that basically was an answer to Samuel Huntington's clash of civilization, reflected this view. And yes, this was the time of the reformist. But Hatami did not have the required power to implement the policies he sought to promote. And as a result, the hardliners and the security establishment became the main dominant factor in Iran's political arena, and that was the decline in the reformist power in Iranian politics. And shall we not forget, during his term in office, a large student protest sparked that reflected the discontent of the young generation. And basically, Hatami couldn't do very much because he doesn't have a direct access to the security establishment and the judiciary system. That belong to the Rahabar. And that leads us to the period of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad outspoken statements in regard of foreign issues, such as the elimination of Israel, denial of the Holocaust, and these vast relations with Hugo Chavez in Venezuela that enabled Iran to influence in the Latin American continent, served as a catalyst for the West to impose more sanctions. And on the domestic level, his attempts to replace subsidies with allowances just accelerated the inflation. And shall we not forget Ahmadinejad's inability to stand behind his promise to deliver the oil revenues to the food table of the Iranians, to the sofre, created a decline for his support. And of course, his messianic approach that reflected the worldview of the Anjumana Hujjatiyya that wanted to accelerate the return of the hidden Imam was contradicted by senior members of the ulama. And yes, Iran's disputed election and the suppression of the civil protest created a gap in Iran's society. And shall we not forget the two leaders of the Green Movement are still in house arrest, Mir Hussein Mousavi or Mehdi Koubi. So we arrive to the fifth period, and that's the period of Rouhani's. I will argue that during Rouhani's term, Iran continued expanding its influence in the Middle East, testing the stability of the Persian Gulf regime and challenging the security of Israel. However, Rouhani's opponents continuously criticize his policies, especially on the economic realm. And as a result, Rouhani made, in his second time in office, a diversion towards the policies and statements of the hardliners and the Revolutionary Guards. And lately, allocation of vast sum of money that went to the axis of resistance led to a great frustration among Iranians that just wanted that some of the money will go to their pocket in order to make their life a little bit better. Previous. So, Iran's pursuit of hegemony led the creation of two blocs, one led by Iran and the other one by Saudi Arabia. And those two blocs work one against each other in terms that remind us the Cold War between the superpower that lasted more than 4 decades. And this animosity didn't start lately. Basically, it started right after the revolution, because Khomeini hoped that sympathy for his teaching will create or implement his leadership in the Muslim world. And as a result, he challenged the historical role of the Saudi king as a custodian of the two holy places, Mecca and Medina. So, the struggle of power between these two blocs led to a number of confrontations in the Gulf area. In regard to Iraq, I will say that Iran has the upper hand. It's a well-known secret that the invasion of 2003 and the collapse of the Ba'ath regime was a big present to Iran that knows how to implement its policies in states that are on the verge of collapse. And shall we not forget, right after the invasion, the establishment of Jaish al-Mahdi, headed by Muqtada al-Sadr. A year later, Kataib Hezbollah, the Iraqi Kataib Hezbollah, in 2007, Asaib Ahl al-Haq. They all represent the same pattern. And on top of this, after June 2014, the establishment of al-Hashd al-Shabi, a big success from Iran point of view. And on the other hand, the Saudis are trying to change the balance of power in their favor. And the efforts reflect in proposals for rehabilitation of damaged cities, commercial initiatives, and mutual visits by seniors. But still, Iran has the influence on the political realm, on the security realm, and even on the economical realm of Iraq. In Bahrain, the situation is a little bit different, because so far it appears that the Saudis are succeeding in maintaining the rule of Al-Khalifa family despite Iran's effort to change the balance of power in its favor. And shall we not forget, 70% of Bahrain population belong to the Shia sect of Islam. And here, the same pattern the establishment of radical organization, Saraya al-Ashtar, Saraya al-Mukhtar, Saraya Wahdallah, Saraya al-Mukawama al-Shabia, they all represent the same pattern of proxy model the Iran is implemented in order to gain achievements from its point of view. In regard to Qatar, I won't elaborate because it will be discussed extensively in the next panel, but in regard to Yemen, I will just say that Iran is using the same template that she is using in Lebanon with the Hezbollah against Israel. She is implementing in Yemen with the Ansar Allah, the Houthis, against the Saudis. And another dimension is that Iran has set itself as a goal to establish presence on the margins of the Indian Ocean and of the Gulf of Aden. And the Saudi regime knows this fact very well. So I will conclude by saying that one of the main achievements of the theocratic regime is the preservation of the regime's stability based on uncompromising loyalty to the ideological line led by Khomeini. And another achievement is the expansion of the sphere of influence into other countries in the Middle East. But the gap between the Islamic leadership ambition for regional hegemony and the ordinary ambitions people desire, for a lower cost of living and better life will remain an issue for debate in the future. And in regard to the political realm, my basic notion is that the main tension in Khomeini's teaching in the Velayat al-Faqih will always remain the balance of power dilemma, divided between the selected and the elected, because the selected receive their power from above, from the Rahabar mainly, and the popular elected receive their power from below. And that's what I call intisab versus intihab. And the dialogue between these two different forces will remain the source of future conflicts in Iran political arena. Thank you so much.